Imagine a desert planet where water is more precious than gold, where giant sandworms rule the dunes, and where a young man's destiny could reshape the entire universe. Today, we're chatting about Frank Herbert's masterpiece, Dune, the sprawling epic that asks profound questions about power, ecology, religion, and what truly makes a society thrive. I'm Space Admiral Candace,
I'm Space Cadet Shane, second class.
and you are listening to Sci-Fi Book Pod. We did it! We reached episode 10. Shane, did you think we'd get this far?
Oh,
You did. You thought we'd get to 10.
oh yeah.
I
Oh,
had
yeah.
doubts. I had doubts. Our visiting dignitary today is Adam Heeren, a software engineer whose love for science fiction started as a baby watching Star Trek: The Next Generation and has evolved into a passion for reading that keeps him constantly turning pages. Welcome, Adam.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
So you picked the book Dune by Frank Herbert, which was written in the 1960s. And obviously you are much younger than Shane and I, because I was a late teenager when Star Trek Next Generation came out. And Shane's
It's
older than me.
PG. My folks just had it on in the background. It's like, it's good for the goose, good for the gander. The kids will grow up to be nerds. I never had a chance.
We
No, you didn't.
we took our daughter Dorothy to see a Star Wars movie 2 weeks after she was born. It was when they had
Yeah.
It was when they had re-released the original series. Was that it? That when they re-released the original series?
No, it was the first one. It was the one with Jar Jar.
I
That was
don't
the
know
one
Jar
with
Jar.
Jar Jar. Yeah.
So, Adam, why did you choose Dune as the book for today's discussion?
I think in the last 4 or 5 years, there's been like a resurgence of Dune stuff. With the movies, there's a few new games that I've really enjoyed, and looking back, there hasn't been like a 10-year period, say, without Dune stuff coming out. This is the fourth and fifth movies that I can recall. There's been miniseries, games, and sequel novels and all this stuff. And I thought, thinking like, what would be a good thing to cover is like the OG, right, where it all came from, which for my money is the best Dune, is just called Dune. That said, I think the movie Denis Villeneuve made, the movies really are just what I had in my head. I don't know if you guys have seen them, but apparently that was like the reason he got into directing. But for me, I had seen movies and played games, but hadn't actually read Dune until like maybe 2022, and that's largely because I just have the type of ADHD that makes it really hard to finish books, especially big books, especially high concept books. But that's one of the things that I love about Dune, is that it is all those things, but also still so readable and so interesting, and like it's got everything. There's a knife fight in the first 5 pages of the book. There's space feudalism and sci-fi, but also giant monsters and a hero's journey, and it makes sense that it is so beloved. And that said, I hope y'all like it, because this is gonna be an awkward one if if y'all just like, no, it didn't resonate. But or I'll go to the mattress for Dune if that is the case, honestly. But yeah, that was the motivation, and I figured, yeah, within the first 10 episodes, I had to pick Dune because someone's gonna snatch it up. There's no way this goes for more than 50 episodes without someone's saying, all right, well, we gotta talk about Dune.
To that point, it has been very interesting, the books that people have because there's probably 10 or 15 episodes booked that we haven't read the books yet, and then this is episode 10, so the 10 books or the 9 books that we've read up to now, and they're all so different, but there are overarching themes. Something that I've noticed is that there's an underlying theme for most of these, that humans are stupid. But the nice thing about Dune is that it is not based on Earth. It is it's like Star Wars. It's a galaxy far, far away. So we can remove ourselves from some of their stupidity, even though I see so many parallels. And it was written in the 1960s, but I swear there are things that happen in this book that could have happened in the United States yesterday.
It's really, yeah, a point to how timeless it is like how well the high concept stuff kind of sticks. It's like it's not about our humanity. It's about this, this far-flung what if we just evolved past everything that we are dealing with now, like in terms of our governments and our technology and philosophy. Like they just, for example, said, okay, well, we're going to have one religion because they're all about peace and loving mankind and afterlife, and take the different things about religion that are similar and put it into this new religion. And that happens like 10,000 or thousands of years before the start of the book. So even that is anachronistic and like old-fashioned to have any kind of religion.
But
But
isn't that what Catholicism is? Catholicism is they've absorbed the religions from the places where the
yeah,
conquistadors conquered.
Well, that's why
yeah.
they keep on going to they go to the old CO Bible or OC Bible, Orange. I looked it up. It was Orange Catholic Bible.
Yeah, I don't
It's
know
a,
why
it's
it's
a,
orange, but
yeah, who knows?
Because the leaders have orange hair?
is that right?
But
Well, they're redheads, I guess.
no, who knows?
It might be
Um,
covered later in a later book, the reason why it's called the Orange Catholic Bible.
the book came out in 1965. All right. And then I kind of looked up Foundation, Isaac Asimov's book, and that came out in 1951, I think.
It was I
And
read
so
Foundation.
I was trying to figure out basically how what the decade of books that were popping out at that time, because you had writers like you had Gene Roddenberry who was doing the Star Trek, you had Frank doing this Dune, and then you had, why do I always forget his name? Fahrenheit 451. I love him. I have
Bradbury.
tons of books. No,
Ray
not
Bradbury.
Ray Bradbury. All right, so they all came out in the same era, kind of thing, and that's what I was kind of looking at, because none of these had Star Wars interpretation. In other words, they didn't have Star Wars influence on them. Barely, they didn't even have Star Trek influence on them. Actually, they had more basically of these were really coming out of sci-fi. I mean, they were really mythical stories, really, and
I
so they
think
were
they
using.
have a lot of Greek um,
Well, yeah, yeah.
tragedies.
So I kind of like on for Dune. Now you got to realize, I saw the first Dune. Dune was never on my horizon because I was a Star Wars kid when Star Wars came out in 1977. So my world was engulfed by that. And so 84, David Lynch came out with Dune, all right, which was supposed to be a 3.5 hour movie. The movie people wanted it more down to basically two and a half. So they compromised at two, and that's why it was kind of chopped up a little bit. And also that when I when I went to go see it in theaters by myself, okay, in 84, I think, 84, that it just came off Empire Strikes Back. Okay. All right. So here am I. I remember seeing it in Bryan College Station. So I had been, and I did it by myself. I went by myself. So I'm assuming I'm like 15 or 16 at the time. And so when I went into the theater, and I remember this day, I had a piece of paper. They gave us a piece of paper, and that piece of paper had the terminology, a definition,
Really?
a glossary of all the characters. All right. And I go, what am I, I'm a guy with dyslexia. Where are we going with this?
And then they put you in a
And
dark room.
right. They put me in a room. And so when I saw this movie, I had no ties to the books whatsoever. So what I saw is basically my first interpretation of Dune. And David Lynch did it. I didn't know who David Lynch was. I just knew it was going to be another sci-fi, and I hoped it was like another Star Wars because that's what everybody was saying. So I was hit with this movie. Then I first realized this is almost taking the same floor plan as, say, 16th, 17th century. All right. And we're shoving it in space. And so my brain, and I don't think a lot of people didn't, because that movie didn't do very well in the theaters at the time. Had a small spike, and then it kind of plateaued really fast because it was a very confusing movie because they chopped it up kind of thing. But the thing was, is that I had to basically say, okay, this isn't Star Wars. All right. This isn't Star Trek. All right. Comes from a different mind. This comes from a different era. So I had to put myself there. And that's what this book does. This book is basically, it's literature. It's high literature. It's something that basically any English literature teacher would assign this to any student, because I've read War and Peace and I've read Les Miserables front to back so many times. The thing is that it has the same characteristics. They have Atlas Shrugged as high literature. So this is no different than basically a book of that size. It's well thought out, it's well written, it's well researched. It's, like you said, intrigue, current governments, past governments, whatever. But at the end, this is no spoiler because everybody have seen this either movie or this book, is that it followed the traditions of a monarchy, which was basically you have to marry the emperor's daughter, not your concubine. All right, because these are heads of state kind of thing. And they're tied to these things. And that's the same thing. So basically, Stilgar, when he rode the worm, all the young people said, oh, it's going to be a challenge. It's going to be a fight. It's going to be this. One of them's going to survive. Even his mother didn't know how he was going to get out of this one. And the most important part was that he claimed the throne as the Duke. Once he claimed the throne as a Duke, he's no longer one of them.
The signet that's like such a Chekhov's gun that like, oh, that was the only thing he had left from his father.
So it was from that part, he took the role as the Duke and no longer as a freeman. So the challenge to Stilgar doesn't exist anymore. He made Stilgar his captain, his basically his liaisons to the freemen. And that basically that was a political move. That was because what his goal was to get to the throne. That's my spiel.
I have a couple threads I want to pull on from stuff you said. Like you mentioned spoilers about like this is what the end is, and
This
that
is
reminded
Sci-Fi
me.
Book Pod. There's
Yeah,
no
yeah.
spoilers. Yeah,
Well,
spoilers are part of the show.
one reason I had held off on reading it for so long was, oh well, I saw the movie, I saw the miniseries, I know how it ends. But Dune is interesting in that way that it is about, in many ways, like revealing what's going to happen before it happens. Like, and it's resilient to spoilers to an extent, I think. Obviously the fine details, but like halfway through the book, Paul says, "Oh, well, I'm gonna have a jihad and become this religious leader, and I don't want to do this golden path." And like 2 pages into the book, you have the Bene Gesserit saying, "Oh, well, yeah, Duke Leto's definitely gonna die. There's no way he's not gonna die." It's like, and that happens like halfway through the book, and it doesn't make it any less thrilling. The Harkonnen invasion, the U.S. betrayal, and all that. And
You mentioned. Well, here's another thing that basically I want to like. It's a time thing. It's a generational thing. Even for me, when I was in the theaters and I heard the word jihad, you got to realize this is 1984, right? So that term was used for the Middle East situation we had at that time, which seems to be continuous. But the thing when it was written was 1964, 5. All right. That was not a common term, except with basically of an old time of middle age scenarios or crusades. And so he literally made basically kind of a Lawrence of Arabia scenario.
I was gonna say Lawrence of Arabia talks about
Yeah.
jihad.
Yeah.
Same time frame.
Because because he the whole image of the desert, the whole image of the freeman, the whole image of that reeks of basically of Lawrence of Arabia. And
There's more than just the Arab themology with the desert, though. I mean, the Catholic Bible, and
right.
I felt like there was some Asian influence. There's a lot of, because the Earth, the planet that we live on, is made up of many, many cultures. So if you come from different planets that have different environments, you're going to have different thinking, and all of that is going to, it's like in the United States, I'm just going to give an example. You could get a Korean taco, right? With bulgogi and cheese and all that stuff in it. And it's not a traditional Mexican food and it's not a traditional Korean food, but it's delicious. Frank Herbert was bringing in all these different ideas to create a book, but he was using words to describe things that the reader would understand rather than making up words.
Well, the way I understand Dune, what little research is that the past, the AI scenario, there was a Terminator scenario. In other words, it was 1,000 years ago, I think.
that is the Butlerian Jihad, where they killed all the AIs, and that's tied into the planet Dune and the spice because the machines were able to calculate the position that you would teleport to in space travel. So the technology, this is all EU stuff, but the technology is it's really easy, relatively speaking, to teleport across time and space to go from one end of the galaxy to the other. The difficulty is knowing where you're going to end up because of relativity. So you could teleport, but you might end up in a sun or on the opposite end of the universe or this or that. And so the AIs had the super consciousness that was able to calculate where you would end up. So they needed the AIs to do space travel. And then the AIs took over, and instead they have the navigators who have
Yeah.
like they can see beyond time and space and into the future and all this weird stuff. And that's kind of what replaced the AIs, and that's why it's the spices needed for space travel. And yeah, the Dune Compendium was a lot of fun. That's just like an encyclopedia that's in universe.
That's why when I was a young person and saw this movie, all right, and then when I kind of like got a hold of some audio because I'm dyslexic as hell, so I was no way I was going to finish that damn book, and even today. And but the thing was is that when I first listened to the book on audio, like the full version, it was just like, holy shit, this is the movie didn't even touch any of this. And it was very similar to basically when I dug into Les Miserables, which is about that thing too, is that what really got me into Miserables was not the play. The play is actually, I find, boring in a way. But what really got me into Miserables was the movie with Miserables with who's the guy doing the new Naked Gun movie?
Liam Neeson.
Yeah, Liam Neeson. So he did that role, and he did that role in the director, and I forgot who was the inspector. But the thing was, is that they captured the passion. They really did. They captured the passion of that book. So it made me want to read the book. So I went and got the audio then the book, and it was just like, holy shit, there's like 5 books in this thing. And so Dune is very much very similar the same way, is that it wasn't so much for me anyway. When I saw the David Lynch's movie captures the spirit of Dune, especially the beginning where basically it's dark, it's wooden, it's this. And it was all everything was to show wealth. Like they were able to bring, and that's even said in the book that they were able to bring wood in to build these palaces on Arrakis. And that showed basically whoever visitor, whatever it is basically how much wealth they had, kind of thing. And so that took me that spirit of that movie took me to wanting to know more about that book and what's made me read about book. Now, after I read the book, the sci-fi had a miniseries. Did you watch that? Yeah. That's the most complete series. That is most complete that follows the book.
I'd
And
say so.
then the HBO one, I mean not the HBO one, but the new one came out and it was fun. We didn't watch the second one. And the reason why I didn't watch the second one is because a coworker of mine says his sister wasn't in it. I go, what do you mean his sister wasn't in it? I go, his sister wasn't in it. I go, his sister's everything.
Yeah, she's one of the most important characters of the story.
you know and without the sister is basically is but again you have Hollywood.
Doing
It's
Hollywood
hard.
stuff.
It's hard to do this book unless you've got a week to do it with you
I
know
think there are a handful of changes, and that's a major one. Obviously, is Aaliyah not being born. She's teased. She like Jessica has conversations with her fetus, but I think like that's just something that how do you put like a 1 or 2 year old on screen stabbing someone to death? And it's just like that's weird, and it works absolutely perfectly in a book, but in the movie, Baron still dies, but it's someone else. And I'll say I think the movie is terrific. I think Denis said that it was always his passion project, and you have things like the ornithopters that look so great, and the
yeah,
casting's
those
so
look
good.
awesome.
Um, but anyways, I think he's very conscious, and the changes are done with respect. So I think yeah, it diverges, but as a huge fan of the book, I still think it's still great. But yeah, Aaliyah is an interesting character for sure. She really gets to shine in the second book because you kind of get this warning like, oh my God, she's an abomination. We gotta kill her. She's the
Right,
devil.
right, 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 right,
And
right.
in the second book, you see what that means, like what the bad things that happen because of that. And gosh,
Well, don't
there's
you? I never got past the first book. We
Yeah.
didn't go into the second books or third books.
The problem with hosting a podcast about science fiction books is that all these books have sequels, and we don't have enough time to read them all.
no, no.
You know?
I mean, Dune's actually one of the ones that we need to work on.
Yeah. So the
Um,
first time I read Dune, I was in 8th grade, and it took me 2 semesters to finish it because it was so long. I was 14 years old, so the perspective of a 14-year-old reading a book like that is different than it would be if as an adult. So I have not read it since I was 14, and we actually listen to the books on Audible because you can listen to them on 1.5 speed, and it just gets things done faster, right? So listening to the book again, I have not seen all the movies like Shane has, right? I'm not as invested in this story as Shane is or as you are, Adam. But as I was listening to the book again, I kept thinking about how wonderfully written it was and that it really is a perfect, you know, hero's journey novel, right? It didn't have to have a sequel. It could have ended where it ended. But I want to go backwards because earlier you were talking about foreshadowing. You were talking about how they predicted the death of Duke Leto and all that. Foreshadowing is a very important literary technique, and it's used really well in this book because they do tell you ahead of time. We know about the baby. We know that she's going to be horrible for, for the almost the entire book. We know that she's going to do terrible things, right? And here she turns out to be a murderer at age 4. Or I think she was 4 when it happened. But I kept thinking about the movie Terminator. And at the very beginning of the movie Terminator, there is a scene where a little toy semi-truck gets run over by a car, which is foreshadowing of the end of the movie where the semi-truck explodes. If you've watched the movie twice, it's something that you look for. So Herbert planted these little pieces, these little clues through the book because he wanted people to read it twice. He wanted people
yeah,
to go back and say, "Oh, yeah,
yeah. That's why I said this book was a literature piece of work because basically it's there to study. He literally did it for
yeah."
a
And yes, I
reason.
did say that the original movie Terminator is a literary masterpiece.
Well, so was Rocky. I mean, it's just when they start working off those second, third, and fourth,
Yeah,
and fifth, and eight movies
yeah,
that it's just like somebody has to pull it away from them.
yeah.
But
Anyway, Adam, I
Rocky.
think I think Adam got distracted from he had 2 things he wanted to talk about.
Oh,
The
okay. Yeah,
first one
yeah.
Oh
was
yeah.
the thread.
The other thing was dictionary, the glossary that you got when you went to see the movie, because I guess I don't know if that was integrated in the audiobook at all, but there's 3 appendices. You know, you can read them after you read the book or before, but they provide this context of like what Dune is, what Arrakis/Dune is, the planet, why it's important. The Dune religion is, yeah, there's the ecology of Dune, the religion of Dune, and then the thesaurus, or the glossary, are the 3 appendices, I think. But, it gives so much context, and gives you a list of the characters and their roles, and it's like, it's not just as like a helpful thing to the reader, it's in universe. It's because they have the quotes from Princess Aurelian, it's like, oh, this is slightly written to be like a commentary, after the fact, or a history or something like that. And that's so great because in a lot of books where there's weird stuff that, a lot of made up weird terms, there has to be like an aside, like, oh, he saw the Fuselwatches, which is a little box that you use to do whatever, or it just is a bit clunky in the writing sometimes, where they have this huge crazy world and it has to be explained. And I think it's a really elegant way of doing it. I've read a lot of books where I'm like, oh my gosh, can't they just include a glossary like Dune?
What book was that? What book did I was telling you? Which one did we do that
Too
problem?
Like the Lightning. The previous episode to this one, Too Like the Lightning. It needed a
Okay, yeah. So yeah, it's where the writer assumes you know exactly what the hell they're talking about, and it's just like, I need some reference here. And so at least the theater or David Lynch or the studio had its wisdom at that time. I wish I would have kept that piece of paper. I'm sure I could look it up.
I'm sure it's out there
Anyway,
somewhere on the internet.
yeah. but anyway, they had enough wisdom or they had enough sense of going when they got done seeing the movie, going, nobody's going to get this unless they have a glossary
Yeah.
kind of thing.
You need to
But he makes the same. He makes this. In other words, if you ever took the challenge of getting into War and Peace, the novel, it's the same way because they use terms of 16th, 17th, 18th century to describe the royalty. And it's just like, what the hell are they talking about? Because we're so used to having English royalty. It's just like, oh, this is how it works and this, that, and the other thing. Russian or European, deep European royalty doesn't work that way. And you have to have almost a glossary to figure out who's who and who's what and why is everybody a prince. So I felt that same way when I was reading Dune or when I was watching, reading, listening Dune, or whatever it is.
Letting Dune
It's
wash over you.
yeah, exactly, exactly. And I think that's the attraction of Dune is that it's because I mean, this is probably the third, fourth time I've listened to it, and I'm going, I miss these parts, or I didn't pay attention to these parts. Like, I
or a
mean,
detail
there's
makes more sense when you're looking at it
yeah,
with a
yeah,
different
yeah,
lens.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And and like I said, this was written before Star Trek, before Star Wars, Battlestar Galactica, which you are, Adam, are basically you are covered with it. You know what I mean? So for you, you look at Dune, you probably see Dune and go, "Oh, what is this new thing? What is this new?" Because the storylines. I heard you use the term "hero's journey," which is Joseph Campbell's scenario, which is basically a Star Wars kind of scenario, which kind of comes up
Which is every
again.
major literature
Yeah,
book.
exactly, exactly. And so it's, instead of having a farm boy, we have a prince. And both of those movies, Star Trek and I mean Dune and Star Wars, both have this young Jedi per se, or this was it Kwisatz Haderach or Kwisatz what?
Kwisatz Haderach.
Haderach. All right, but the thing is that, and I understand because I mentioned this to my wife or the Admiral, that when he wrote this book, I mean, Paul was like 18 when he
14.
became emperor. No, when he became emperor or
Oh,
when he
okay,
basically
yeah,
killed what's
18,
his
yeah,
name.
yeah.
But he started off being 14 and then 15 and then 16 and so on. Um, the Baron, what's his name?
Vladimir Harkonnen.
Yeah, no, the nephew, the one with
Fade Rotha?
Fade. Yeah, Fade Rotha. He was like 17 and he's killed 100 people in the, so on and so on. So it's kind of like, if you read the book, you get more of a like, that makes a lot more sense now. Then you
Yeah.
just look at the movies, you kind of going, you know, because in the movies, all of them are portrayed as being like over 20 years old, and they
Okay.
weren't.
So we have to remember this book was written in the 1960s, and it does have that 17th century literature feel to it, right?
Space feudalism.
And in the 17th century, people lived to like 50. And so if they were not married and warriors by 18, that they were behind the times. We live in a different time now, and so our time frame is different. I mean, Shane and I got married when we were like 30, right? That I would have been an old hag 200 years ago. So times change and perspectives change. But even from 1965 to 2025, that is 60 years. There's a huge difference in the way people see the world. Books are written for the time that they're in, that they're written for the reader in the
And the
year that
time
they're
they are,
written.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And yeah, I
That's what.
would, you know,
That's why you got to take a class of Shakespeare,
well,
just to,
I was
just to
gonna
understand
say,
it.
that you understand Shakespeare a lot better if you learn it in ninth grade from a literature instructor, right? If your ninth grade literature teacher is really good at explaining Shakespeare, you can understand Shakespeare for the rest of your educational career. But if the
Yeah,
person
if
you
you got to,
take ninth grade English from doesn't get Shakespeare and can't explain it to you and explain to you what these little nuances mean, you're never going to get Shakespeare.
yeah, you're not
So,
going to get,
and
you're
I
not going to
think
get the. You're too young. You're too young. It's kind of like Hemingway. Is that basically if you want to really know Hemingway, it's better for you to read it when you're probably, I don't know, 28 or so. That you
the
have a lot. They have somewhat of a reference of life, and then you can kind of understand the whole Hemingway process.
Well,
Um,
like I said at the beginning, I was 14 the first time I read Dune, and now I'm 50. How old am I?
right,
55? And now I'm 55. I have a much different viewpoint on life and a different life experience, and the book meant a different was different. Reading it was different this time, and I liked it
right,
a lot better.
right.
I mean,
So so
I
so
liked it a lot better.
so Adam, you said you grew up on Star Trek, like my daughter. Who's your favorite character, by the way?
Data, the best character, obviously.
Right. I see. Here's the thing. I'm warming up to Will Riker more than as I get older.
Keiko O'Brien is the best character from Star Trek: Next Generation. Actually, LaForge. LaForge was my favorite when they were about and about. All right, it's time to start wrapping up. So, Adam, do you have any final thoughts on the book?
Well, okay, two things. When I was filling out the form for why I want to talk about Dune, the topic I highlighted was the different societies, the different cultures within the universe. And they're human, but at the same time very alien. So you have the Atreides who are like in many ways just classical good guys. They believe in honor and respect and the value of human life and when they become in charge of Dune, they respect the Fremen. Then you have the Harkonnens who are just earth ashes. They lead through fear and force. The Bene Gesserit who control all the governments from the sidelines, but they have very little raw power, but are all conniving. So that's like, kind of like political intrigue.
Disagree with you there. I think they have all the power.
Yeah, well, like they don't have soldiers is what I mean. They
Oh,
can't
okay.
invade a planet. They control the governments, through the
Yeah.
lineage and so on.
But when
So
Mother Teresa was alive, she was the most powerful woman on the planet.
But
She
the
could
thing is,
command armies with her voice.
the the witches, all
Yeah.
right,
Well,
and that's what
we
they called
interrupted
them.
Adam. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, but the witches' power came from truth. They could tell who was lying, who wasn't. And Baron made that reference more than once. It's just like you're not going to get past the Emperor's basically truth teller.
yep,
You're just
yep.
not. Go
Um,
ahead.
so through truth, through just superhuman understanding of humanity. So there's the truth saying, which is like they can detect the tiniest reaction in you. But then there's also control of their own bodies. Like poison doesn't work on them because they can control their very organs. And then also the lineage. They are like manipulating the genetic lines to make us superhuman. So through like thousands of years of planning, the
90
Fremen who are
generations.
the
Can
Fremen
you
who are
imagine 90 generations? Okay, sorry. Go ahead. The
That's why
Fremen.
they made it. That's why they got their own show. That show couldn't get past the second episode. I'm like, oh,
They
they
had their
ruined
own
it.
show, the Bene Gesserit?
Yeah, the Dune Prophecy on HBO Max.
Oh, I didn't even know.
That's why I wasn't
Didn't even
interested either. I
know.
guess I
Eh,
didn't even know. There you go.
it- it's not. It has no source materials. But anyways, then you have like the Fremen who are just the ultimate pragmatists. They believe in water or they value water above everything, and they have to exist on this horrible, harsh desert planet. But they still have this very strong faith, which again, like no one has religion anymore except for the Fremen who believe in the Savior and all. So all these different cultures, all these different beliefs, all these different foundations clash, and in this really interesting way that has echoes of real life and real humanity and real struggles. But my closing remark is a meme from the Dune community that is, you have these parallels with real life religion, and maybe the spice represents drugs or oil or anything, but really all the geopolitical stuff, all the religion, that's just set dressing. Dune's actually about worms. Uh, because it just works on every level. If you don't want to deal with any of the high concept stuff, any of the, prophecy, religion, intrigue, that's totally fine. There's again the giant monsters, the fights, the hero who's stranded, whose family is lost and has to bring together this army of rebels against the evil Harkonnens, and it just works so well on every level, and I think that's why so many adaptations of it exist and it has so many fans, present company included.
That's what attracted me when I first saw it in the theater too. Was that the author was willing to create his own and share it with you. So there's a difference in basically of, oh, I'm just going to pull from here. I'm going to pull from here. I'm going to pull from here. I'm going to pull from here. What he did was basically is that this is the world. You got to realize this is Cold War time. right? When he's writing this, right? He's also had experience in other world and other places, right? But what really attracted me in the theater was well, like I said, was the spirit of the movie, right? Was that the detail of the what I'm gonna say, the it's kind of like seeing the French and in the Japanese empires going at each other, and seeing different cultures, and you have to keep that in mind all the time. It's just like, oh yeah, that's right. We can't, I can't pit my own prejudice against this. So you're literally are sitting back. And as you keep on reading this, or you get more invested into this and this and this and this, you learn more and more of the intricate works of basically how he was doing, how the author was just like, you know, and it is endless. It is basically I I could listen to it again, and I guarantee I'll like catch something. I'm going, oh yeah, that's why. That's this, that's that, because of the different how he's just doing that, you know. But it is the classic, like you said. You could just have it on Worms alone, the laser guns and the atomic weapons and all this. That attracts. I would say that attracts the 14 or 15-year-old boy. And as you grow with it, you get to the literature part. So it's kind of like when I was young, I used to listen to Pink Floyd because I liked the melody, right? I could care less about the words. But as I got older, okay, the words became more important than the melody. And I think that's where Dune really plays into, because you start to ask yourself, how does this, as you get older, you kind of go, how does this play with my life now? You know, and you can say, well, I'm not on Dune or this, that, and the other thing, yeah, but you're a human. And this book basically says, are you a human or are you an animal? Paul, are you a human or are you going to pull your hand out of the whatever the hell that box was? And everybody can relate to that, especially a young man who wants to have this trial, right? Am I worthy? Am I worthy? And I think that's the biggest problem we have right now in this our society. But the whole thing was basically the fear is the mind killer. I mean, come on, that's a mantra, man.
Yeah, that it works.
Yeah, and you can use it today as you go to your first job interview, or you ask, the love of your life. you know, do you want to get married? Kind of thing, right? Is the fear is the mind killer. And that is really, really powerful. And I would probably say that's almost like the entire book. And he kind of like built upon that one thing. And I've learned that basically there's a lot of authors will have this one central idea and they'll build this empire or this book around it, kind of thing. Just like George Lucas did. Is that basically he started with this farm boy on this adventure, chasing his shadow, basically, his father. All right. And so who hasn't done that in somewhat sense or form? All right. And so I think that's why this book particular, you can read it for the rest of your life. And you can tell how it's a good work is that if you can read it, if you can listen to it when you're young and it captures you. Okay. And as you grow, it grows with you. All right. That's how you can tell that's why they call it great literature, because it will follow you as you go. All right. I can pull Bob Miserables, War and Peace off the shelves, and I can show you exactly what time frame I'm in, just like that. All right. And so the how many times where basically Paul had the choice of being cruel, all right, and he didn't be cruel. He had a lot of chances, and that's the most important part. When you did that duel, his mother says, "How does it feel to be a murderer?" And you kind of go in Stilgar. What's his name?
Stilgar.
Stilgar. He reinforced her words. All right, by saying this is killing is not an easy thing, is it? Where basically on the other side, where the Harkins, all right, makes it easy. They drug their victims. They drug their prey.
They
They
kill for
drug their
fun.
killer.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's joy for them. All right. And that's the classic. That's just classic. I guess living on the planet Earth, we're always dealing with that. You know, and the thing is, you always ask yourself is basically, how do I deal with that? And I think that book is basically says, fear is the mind killer, because that's the only thing that stops you. You know, it stops you from reading a book. It stops you from doing this. It stops you from doing that. It stops you from doing that. So that's why I enjoy books like this, is that basically it kind of like, you see yourself in it as a hero. All right. And so before you know it, you're cutting off your mom's broomsticks and, putting a robe on and thinking you're Luke Skywalker and jumping off the couch. But that's the thing about the book is it's the same thing with Les Miserables. You see yourself as Jean Javon, right? Although there's no way in hell you could, but you do see yourself as Paul Atreides of somehow, some way. Hopefully you see yourself as Paul Atreides, as a brave person, as a kind person, as a person of just, and that's what everybody's kind of looking for in this book. It's bad, good versus evil. It's classic, in my opinion.
Okay, so Candace gave the last word to Adam, and then Shane spent 10 minutes pontificating. That is how this podcast goes.
That's why I'm second class, baby. Second class.
Okay, Adam, you do not own a business. Most of the people who come on the show own businesses, and I give them this moment to talk about their business. But we actually met through your wife, who does own a business. So do you want to give her a pitch?
Yes, my wife, Brittany Baguette Heeren, owns Prismatic Venus Fitness LLC. The website is prismaticvenusfitness.com, and she's a fitness instructor. She focuses on pre and postnatal fitness, things like preeclampsia, just general health of mothers during and going through pregnancy and after pregnancy. She does Zumba as well. She's uploading some fitness packages in the near future. You should check her stuff out. She's also got the Wednesday Wellness Debrief, her podcast on Spotify and wherever you get your podcasts. Also worth a listen.
I
Cool.
don't know if Shane could do that for me.
I don't even know what you do. Don't have a clue.
That's awesome. That was excellent. Brittany should be proud of you, Adam.
Aw.
Very good. Very good.
Excellent. All right. So if you have read Dune and you would like to continue the discussion, head over to sci-fi-bookpod.com and leave a comment on this episode and share your thoughts. Tell us what you loved and didn't love about Dune. And if you haven't read Dune, you can purchase it through one of our links in the show notes. This podcast is free to listen to, but it's not free to produce. So if you do purchase through one of our links, we do appreciate you. That's it for this episode. I've been Space Admiral Candace.
Space Cadet Shane, second class.
And just Adam.
And you have been listening to Sci-Fi Book Pod.